The studio lights cut to black. Oprah Winfrey stands frozen at center stage. Her hand presses against her chest. Her microphone slips from her fingers and hits the floor with a hollow thud that echoes through the silent room. 400 people hold their breath. In row 7, an elderly woman clutches a faded photograph to her chest. Her lips are moving, but no sound comes out. Tears stream down weathered cheeks that have seen 8 decades of life. Oprah takes one step forward, then another. Her heels click against the stage floor in a rhythm that sounds almost like a heartbeat. She stops at the edge of the stage. The woman in row 7 raises the photograph. And Oprah Winfrey, for the first time in 37 years of live television, turns to her production team and says 5 words that have never been spoken on this set. Stop. Everything. Turn. Off. The cameras. But here's what happened next. The cameras kept rolling. Because what unfolded in the following 17 minutes would become one of the most watched, most shared, most discussed moments in the entire history of American television. How we get here? Let me take you back to exactly 42 minutes before this moment. Rewind. The morning had started like any other taping day at Harpo Studios. The audience had filed in at 9:15. Coffee had been served. Seat assignments had been made. The warm-up comedian had done his routine. The applause signs had been tested. Today's show was supposed to be about second chances. 3 guests were scheduled. A woman who had rebuilt her life after prison. A man who had reconnected with his estranged daughter after 20 years. A teenager who had survived a car accident that doctors said should have killed her. Standard fare. Emotional but controlled. Rehearsed but genuine. Oprah had reviewed her notes in the green room. She had marked certain questions with small stars. She had underlined phrases she wanted to emphasize. She had done this 10,000 times before. At 9:47, she walked onto the stage. The applause was thunderous, as it always was. She smiled as she always did. She looked out at the 400 faces arranged in perfect semicircular rows, as she had done for decades. But today, something was different. Oprah later said that she felt it before she saw it. A pull. A magnetic sensation in her chest that drew her eyes to a specific location in the audience. Row 7. Seat 14. An elderly woman sat there with perfect posture. Her white hair was pulled back in a simple bun. Her dress was navy blue with small white buttons. Her hands were folded in her lap, and between those weathered fingers, she held something. A photograph. Oprah could not see the image from the stage. The distance was too great. The lights were too bright. But something about the way that woman held that photograph made Oprah's throat tighten. She pushed the feeling aside. The show must go on. And it did. The first guest, Maria Delgado, walked onto the stage at 9:53. She was 44 years old. She had served 8 years in federal prison for a crime she had committed in desperation. She had been released 14 months ago. She had rebuilt her life from nothing. Oprah asked all the right questions. Maria gave all the right answers. The audience responded with all the right emotions. But throughout the entire 18-minute segment, Oprah kept glancing at row 7. The woman had not moved. The photograph remained pressed against her chest. Her eyes never left Oprah's face. Subscribe and leave a comment, because the most powerful part of this story is still ahead. During the commercial break, Oprah's lead producer, Sarah Chun, approached her with a tablet. "Everything okay?" Sarah asked. "You seem distracted." Oprah pointed to row 7. "Who is she?" Sarah scrolled through the audience manifest. Her brow furrowed. "That is strange," she said. "There is no record of how she got that seat. Our system shows that seat as empty. Someone must have made a last-minute switch." "Find out who she is," Oprah said. Sarah nodded and walked away. The break ended. The show resumed. The second guest, Thomas Wright, walked onto the stage. He was 59 years old. He had abandoned his daughter when she was 3 years old. For 20 years, he had lived with that guilt. 6 months ago, he had finally reached out to her. She had forgiven him. His daughter, now 23 years old, was supposed to join him on stage for a surprise reunion. But something happened that no one expected. As Thomas began telling his story, his voice cracking with emotion, the woman in row 7 slowly stood up. No one noticed at first. Thomas continued speaking. The audience continued listening. Oprah continued nodding with practiced empathy. But then the woman took a step forward. And another. And another. She was walking toward the stage. Security moved to intercept her. Two large men in black suits stepped into the aisle. But Oprah raised her hand. "Wait," she said. The single word stopped everyone. Thomas Wright stopped mid-sentence. The security guards stopped moving. The entire studio seemed to freeze in that moment. The woman continued walking. She reached the front row. She stopped at the edge of the stage, and she held up the photograph. From this distance, Oprah could finally see what it depicted. The photograph was old, yellowed around the edges, creased from being folded and unfolded thousands of times. It showed a young girl, perhaps 7 or 8 years old, standing in front of a small wooden house. The girl was smiling. Her hair was in braids. She was wearing a dress that was slightly too big for her. And standing behind her, with one hand resting on her shoulder, was a woman. A woman who looked exactly like the elderly woman standing before Oprah now. But that was not what made Oprah's breath catch in her throat. It was the girl. The girl in the photograph was Oprah. Oprah felt the world tilt beneath her feet. She knew this photograph. She had not seen it in over 40 years. She had believed it was lost forever. And the woman who had taken that photograph, the woman whose hand was resting on young Oprah's shoulder, was supposed to be dead. Behind the scenes, Oprah made a decision that defied every producer's expectation. She stepped off the stage. This was not in the script. This was not in the plan. This was not how the Oprah Winfrey Show operated. But Oprah did not care. She walked down the 3 steps that separated the stage from the audience floor. Her heels clicked against each step with a sound that seemed impossibly loud in the silent studio. She approached the woman. Up close, she could see every line on that aged face, every wrinkle, every evidence of time and hardship and survival. The woman's eyes were wet with tears. "My name," the woman said, her voice trembling, "is Hattie Mae Lee." Oprah's hand flew to her mouth. Hattie Mae Lee. The name hit her like a physical blow. Hattie Mae Lee had been her grandmother's closest friend. She had lived 2 houses down from the small home in Kosciuszko, Mississippi, where Oprah had spent the first 6 years of her life. She had watched over Oprah when her grandmother was working. She had taught Oprah how to read before she started school. She had braided her hair. She had told her stories. She had made her believe that she could be someone. And then, when Oprah was 6 years old, she had moved to Milwaukee to live with her mother. She never saw Hattie Mae Lee again. Decades later, when Oprah had finally achieved enough success to start searching for the people from her past, she had learned that Hattie Mae Lee had died in 1972. At least, that is what everyone had told her. But here she was, standing before Oprah, holding a photograph that proved she was real. "You were supposed to be gone," Oprah whispered. The woman shook her head slowly. "They told me you forgot about us," she said. "They told me that once you became famous, you did not want anything to do with Mississippi anymore. They told me you were ashamed of where you came from." "Who told you that?" Oprah asked. "People," Hattie Mae Lee said. "People who wanted me to give up looking for you." Oprah turned to her production team. Her face was a mask of controlled fury. "We need to stop the show," she said. Sarah Chun stepped forward. "Oprah, we are live in 17 markets. We cannot just stop. Watch me," Oprah said. She turned to face the camera. "I need to tell all of you something," she said. Her voice was steady, but her hands were trembling. "Something has happened that I do not fully understand yet. But I need you to understand something about who I am and where I come from." She paused. "I grew up poor. You all know this. I have talked about it many times. But there's a part of my story that I have never told anyone. A part that was too painful to discuss. A part that I believed was lost to me forever." She reached out and took Hattie Mae Lee's hand in her own. "When I was a little girl, before everything else happened, before the abuse and the poverty and the struggle, there was a time when I was loved. Purely and completely loved. And this woman was part of that love. This is the moment no one in the studio and no one watching at home ever saw coming." Hattie Mae Lee reached into the pocket of her navy blue dress and pulled out a folded piece of paper. "I wrote you a letter," she said. "Back in 1977, when you got your first television job in Baltimore. I was so proud of you, but I never sent it." "Why not?" Oprah asked. "Because I was told that you did not want to hear from people like me anymore," Hattie Mae Lee said. "That your new life had no room for your old life. So I kept the letter. I have kept it for 47 years. And I read it every night before I go to sleep. Because even if you forgot me, I never forgot you." She pressed the letter into Oprah's hands. The paper was soft with age. The creases had nearly worn through in places, but the words were still visible. Oprah unfolded it slowly. "Dear Oprah," she read aloud, her voice breaking with every word. "My baby girl made it. I always knew you would. I told everyone who would listen. That little girl is going to change the world someday. And now look at you. You are on the television. You are helping people. You are everything I knew you would be. I just wanted you to know that I am still here. I still pray for you every night. And I still remember the little girl who used to sit on my porch and tell me that one day everybody was going to know her name. I love you always. Hattie Mae." Oprah could not continue. The tears came too fast. She folded the letter against her chest and pulled Hattie Mae Lee into an embrace that seemed to contain 4 decades of lost time. The audience rose to their feet. Not because the applause sign told them to. Not because they were performing for the cameras, but because they had just witnessed something they would never forget. Sarah Chun stood frozen with her tablet, tears streaming down her own face. The camera operators kept filming, but several of them had to wipe their eyes to keep focus. Thomas Wright, the guest who had been telling his own story of reunion, stood at the edge of the stage with his hand over his heart. And somewhere in the back of the studio, a security guard who had worked at Harpo for 15 years quietly excused himself because he could not maintain his professional composure. Share and subscribe. Make sure this story is never forgotten. For 17 minutes, the show did not continue. For 17 minutes, Oprah Winfrey sat in row 7 with Hattie Mae Lee and did something she rarely did. She listened. She learned about the 47 years they had lost. She learned about the lies that had been told. She learned about the people who had deliberately kept them apart because they were jealous of Oprah's success and wanted to punish her by erasing her past. She learned that Hattie Mae Lee had watched every single episode of the Oprah Winfrey Show since its national debut in 1986. She had cut out every magazine article. She had saved every newspaper clipping. She had built a shrine to the little girl she had helped raise, even believing she would never see her again. And she learned how Hattie Mae Lee had finally made it to the studio today. Her granddaughter had written to the show 17 times over the past 5 years. 17 letters. 17 pleas. 17 attempts to reunite these two women before it was too late. Because Hattie Mae Lee was 89 years old. And she had been diagnosed with congestive heart failure 8 months ago. The doctors had given her a year. She had used 3 months of that year to find a way to get into this studio. When Oprah heard this, she took Hattie Mae Lee's hands in her own and made a promise. "You're not leaving my life again," she said. "Do you hear me? Not now. Not ever. Whatever time we have left, we are spending it together. But I live in Mississippi," Hattie Mae Lee said. "I cannot just move." Oprah smiled through her tears. "Watch me," she said again. Over the next 6 months, Oprah personally oversaw the construction of a small cottage on her property in California. It was designed specifically for Hattie Mae Lee, with medical equipment built into the walls, with nurses on call 24 hours a day, with every comfort that money could provide. But more than that, it was designed with love. The front porch had a swing where they could sit in the evenings and watch the sunset. The kitchen had a table small enough for 2 people to share breakfast. The walls were covered with photographs from Oprah's childhood, photographs that Hattie Mae Lee had saved all these years. Hattie Mae Lee lived for another 18 months, far longer than the doctors had predicted. When asked how she had survived so long against medical expectations, she always gave the same answer. "I had to finish watching my baby girl change the world." Oprah was holding her hand when she passed. The letter from 1977 was buried with her. But before that, Oprah had made a copy. She had it framed. She hung it in her office, where it remains to this day. And every time someone asks her about her most memorable moment in 37 years of television, Oprah tells the same story. "The day I learned that love does not disappear," she says. "It just waits for you to find it again." She pauses, and she always adds one more thing. "Never assume that the people who loved you have forgotten you. Never believe the voices that tell you your past is shameful. And never, ever give up on finding the people who made you who you are. Because they're still out there, waiting." The episode that aired on that November day became the most watched episode in the history of The Oprah Winfrey Show. It has been viewed online over 200 million times. It has been translated into 43 languages. It has inspired thousands of people to reconnect with lost family members. But for Oprah, the numbers do not matter. What matters is the letter. What matters is the 18 months she got to spend with a woman who taught her to read. What matters is the knowledge that love, true love, cannot be erased by time or distance or lies. The tissue that Oprah used to wipe her tears that day, the same tissue that Hattie Mae Lee had offered her from her own pocket, is now displayed in a small frame in the Smithsonian National Museum of African American History and Culture. Next to it is a placard that reads, "The moment that reminded America that fame cannot replace family, and success means nothing without the people who believed in us first." Oprah visits it once a year. She stands before it in silence, and she remembers. There is one final detail that most people do not know. When Oprah had walked off the stage that day, when she had made the decision to stop the show and approach Hattie Mae Lee, something had fallen from her pocket. It was a small notebook. The same notebook she had been using for 30 years to jot down thoughts during shows. Ideas, observations, moments she wanted to remember. When a production assistant picked it up later and returned it to her, Oprah flipped to the page that had been open when it fell. There, in her own handwriting from earlier that morning, before she had seen Hattie Mae Lee, before she had known anything about what was about to happen, she had written 4 words. "Today will change everything." She does not know why she wrote those words. She does not remember writing them. But she believes, with every fiber of her being, that some part of her knew. Some part of her felt Hattie Mae Lee coming. Some part of her remembered. And some part of her never forgot. That is the power of connection. That is the power of presence. That is the power of never giving up on the people who shaped us. That is the legacy of Oprah Winfrey. Not the billions of dollars. Not the magazine covers. Not the interviews with presidents and celebrities. But this, a woman who stopped her own show to hold the hand of someone who once held hers. A woman who chose love over ratings. A woman who proved that the most important moment is always the one happening right now. Subscribe to this channel so you never miss another story like this. Because there are more stories to tell. There are more connections to make. There are more people waiting to be found. And somewhere out there, someone is holding a letter they never sent. Waiting, just like Hattie Mae Lee waited, for 47 years, until the day she finally walked down that aisle. And changed everything.